I am Flavia Bellieni Zimmermann from the Australian Institute of International Affairs in Western Australia, and today we have with us Professor David Stewart. Professor David Stewart, he's an adjunct professor at Murdoch University School of Law, and he's the principal of Bellieni and Co-Lawyers. Today we are going to be discussing personal data laws and the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Thank you for being with us, David.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. David, can you please explain to us how the Cambridge Analytica had used personal data?
The key thing here is used. It's a past tense now because Cambridge Analytica are no longer in existence. They are now insolvent and wound themselves up, no doubt because of the publicity and the attention that the entire issue attracted when they, through a variety of chains involving other companies, managed to acquire a very significant amount of personal data of Facebook users, literally in the tens of millions, most of them out of the United States and the Philippines, but also Australians, at least a few 100,000 according to the analysis that's been done. And what they did with that is the subject of some controversy, but it seems as though, the lead theory is that information was used to influence two key global events, one of them being the election of Donald Trump, whereby the information was used to target particular individuals of particular persuasion, so those people who Cambridge Analytica's personnel identified as being capable of persuasion by reason of their emotional makeup, which they had determined from this data, and to target those people in swing states during the election. So, in particular, what would be regarded as traditional Democrat voting states in and around the Great Lakes of North America, where Hillary Clinton didn't even visit. She just assumed that they were safe Democrat havens. And it was an enormous surprise when some of these places turned and voted for the Republicans, for Donald Trump, during the presidential election. So that's the first way in which that information is alleged to have been used. The second was in relation to Brexit, where, again, one of the financial backers of Cambridge Analytica, who had invested an open interest in supporting Donald Trump, was also a Brexiteer, an American who supported the idea that the United Kingdom would split off from the European Union. And so some of that information, again, seemed to have been targeted at particular voters in particular locations, which manifested in unexpected support for Brexit. And interestingly, a lot of those voters were people who actually substantially financially benefited from European Union subsidies in lower socio-economic areas where European subsidies were supporting local businesses and local communities, and yet they voted against what you would have regarded as being something in their inherent interest. With themes around sovereignty and this concept of reclamation of sovereignty and self-determination by the United Kingdom against this idea of foreign bureaucrats sitting in Brussels telling the United Kingdom what to do and taking vast sums of money so they could sit around and have coffee or something. I don't know. So the entire thing was very pointed. That information is granular and was used in respect of, particularly by the United Kingdom Independence Party, in respect of persuading those people to vote against what would have been in their economic interest and instead appealing to their emotions.
Thank you. And David, can you please explain to us how personal data laws could have prevented the misuse of personal data?
Well, it depends upon the extent to which those personal data laws manifest. So presently in Australia, our data protection laws are good, but they're mostly orientated towards unauthorised release or inadvertent release, where there's a notifiable data breach regime which was introduced or came into operation in the Privacy Act in February this year. In the United Kingdom, or rather throughout the entirety of Europe, you've got a type of regulation which came into effect in May, which has much more onerous obligations upon people, or upon predominantly companies who are in possession of personal information, enabling people whose personal information is held by those companies to demand that it be handed over or that it be destroyed or dealt with in particular ways. There's presently no laws which are in existence which would have prevented Cambridge Analytica and its associates and its customers or clients from doing what they did. This idea of using personal data to persuade people to vote a particular way in a particular election or referendum isn't presently contemplated by laws. It'll be interesting on the back of those two scenarios to see what governments start doing in respect of protecting the integrity of their democratic elections.
Fascinating. So can you please explain to us and unpack a bit more which legal frameworks we could put in place domestically and internationally to avoid the misuse of personal data as we have seen in the past with Cambridge Analytica?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because to do this on an international basis would require an enormous amount of cooperation. And traditionally, intellectual property laws, which sort of run in parallel to data, I suppose, because it's a type of intangible asset, those things have been, intellectual property laws have been the subject of pretty much universal protection under the umbrella of the World Trade Organisation and the World Trade Organisation Treaty. There's a thing called the trade-related intellectual property aspects of the WTO regime, where laws have become vastly unified. And I suppose there's an angle there where data protection laws could be implemented on a transnational basis through that regime. As far as I know, nothing like that's been considered. The idea of countries coordinating their efforts to protect their own elections is something that some countries wouldn't find palatable. I suspect that what we're going to see instead is a country-by-country response, where each country decides how specifically it's going to address this through the operation of their electoral laws, that election acts and pieces of legislation will become bolstered, whereby the use of that sort of data is prohibited or limited in some way, shape or form. But I haven't seen any agenda around any of that to date.
And if you could please explain to us, just unpack a bit more, if legislation alone and legal frameworks alone would be sufficient in the near future to prevent the misuse of personal data?
Look, I think there's also some corporate responsibility that comes into that too, because, and you're already seeing that with the likes of Facebook. You can see this in advertising around Perth. Facebook now saying that they're taking proactive steps in relation to shutting down fake accounts and preventing fake news. And they recognise the fact that this scandal in particular has had a significant effect upon trust and confidence that its users and the public at large in many countries has had upon Facebook and what it does. So I think what we will inevitably see is Facebook saying, okay, well, we're a responsible corporate citizen, we're stepping up to prevent this sort of thing from happening. There are some legislative hurdles for them in doing that, because when they start controlling content, then various regulators will say, well, hang on, you're no longer a facilitator of content, you're actually exercising editorial control over it. And so you start falling within various bits of broadcasting legislation. So Facebook have to be very, very careful about that. On the other hand, as all of these inquiries start unfolding in various jurisdictions, the one in the United Kingdom, run by the Office of the Information Commissioner, is quite advanced now. And Facebook comes under increasing scrutiny from all of these regulators who will start making findings which may be very adverse to Facebook's interest, may have an impact or another impact upon its share price. They've got a real balance to strike in relation to this, not wanting to fall within the ambit of regulation as a broadcaster, but at the same time looking like they've actually taken some proactive, some positive steps in relation to the misuse of the information that it aggregates.
Well, thank you so much for being with us.
No problem at all. Thanks, Flavia.
Thank you for being with us, and for more information, please visit our website www.internationalaffairs.org.au.